For whoever's going to be watching this film, my name is Barbara Kagan niece Steinfeld. I was born on the 1st of November 1931. Gosh, that sounds a long time ago, and I'm still here at nearly 83. So for my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and all those who follow on, I'd like you to know just a little of the background. My parents, my two older brothers, and I lived in the East End, and it was a very happy Jewish life. I had two lots of grandparents. My mother's parents lived in Whitechapel and were cloth merchants in Petticoat Lane, and my father's parents lived behind Bethnal Green Synagogue in East London. Everything was wonderful. We had a very nice, comfortable life. We were religious. We never put coal on our fire on a Shabbos. We used to have our Irish maid come in to make sure we didn't catch cold. Or when she didn't turn up, Mum would push me out into the street and said, find somebody and tell them to put coal on for us, please. And everything went nicely. We used to have holidays in Margate, Bournemouth, and a few other seaside resorts in England, never abroad. Nobody went abroad as far as I knew. And then my mother suddenly gave birth to another child, a girl, Anita, in 1939. She was 8 years, she still is 8 years younger than myself. And whilst I was sent with some cousins to stay in a little hostel for the summer, suddenly my eldest brother Harold, who was more like a father to me, came rushing down. We were in Southend, and said, you've all got to come home immediately. War is about to break out. At that stage, we went, my mother, my younger sister and my younger brother went to Cheltenham, where my father had a friend, and we rented a house, and we stayed there. But my father unfortunately decided not to leave his little business and remained in the East End. Whilst we were there, I was very unhappy with the schooling. There was always a bit of a snob in me, which still remains. And every time my father came to visit us, he said, are you happy? I said, well, yes and no. The reason no was because I hated this little school I went to, and I had already located the prep school for the Cheltenham Ladies' College, and the prep school was my idea of class, and that's where I persuaded my father to send me. And also then the next visit I had to have a bicycle to cycle to school, and the school itself was on the race course. So every time I hear now about the Cheltenham races, it puts my mind back to those happy days when I used to look out the window and watch those races. The war continued, the bombing in London stopped. We returned to not to the East End. My father at that time knew a friend in Heathfield Gardens, Brent, who wanted to sell his house, and my father bought it, and we returned to Brent. It was very nice, and then suddenly the flying bombs started, and my father hadn't been well during the war in London, so my mother wouldn't leave him, but sent my sister and I with a Woburn House organisation to Liverpool. And this 1 year we spent there was the most memorable time, until I got married, of course. We lived with 2 sisters and 2 brothers, all unmarried. And from each one I learnt things which have remained with me all my life. The eldest brother taught me about literature. The elder sister taught me about music. And the younger sister about cookery, and the younger brother about making woodwork toys. That I have forgotten about. But the music has given me the love, not only of opera, but of all classical music. And in fact, I went to the Jewish school, the Jewish Free School, which was run by Dr. Conway, who later became the headmaster of the Jewish Free School in London. And through the school, they took children to the opera. I remember only once, I can remember the opera very clearly, The Bartered Bride by Smetana. And then on another occasion we went to the Liverpool Philharmonic, and Sir Malcolm Sargent was the conductor. So this love of music continues, and I go as often as I can to the opera. In fact, I've been a member of the Royal Opera House Friends for over 40 years, since it was first started. Now, where shall I continue? Yes, then when the war was over, we returned to Heathfield Gardens, Brent, and my aunt and uncle, who lived in America, dearly wanted me to go and live with them because they'd only had 2 sons, no daughters. And I was all ready to go. My mother was encouraging me because she never really left the kitchen. She was always working in the home. And it was all set that I would go in 1950. But as fate had it, my mother was ill and had to have an operation. And so for 1 year, the household pretended that everything was all right and my mother was surviving. So before the year was up, it was decided it was time for me to go to work and see how things continued. With the idea of living in America made me seek a job at the American Embassy, which was in Grosvenor Square. I had no idea where Grosvenor Square was, and I had to take a bus to the West End and then keep asking people. And I had the nerve of the devil. I went up to number 1. It wasn't the embassy where it is now, but it was the secretariat on the west side of Grosvenor Square, and I just knocked at the door and said, do you have a vacancy for a secretary? In fact, I was never a real secretary, I was just a shorthand typist. And they said, well, we haven't at the moment, but in a few months' time, we're going to open a department which will operate for 9 months to a year to enable Polish ex-veterans to go to America. And if you're interested, we will contact you as soon as the department is ready. And if you're still interested, we'd love to have you. So it happened, and I went to work at the American Embassy. It was in a house which backed onto Oxford Street on that side of the square. And that was the most fantastic 12 months of work, when things were so hard to get in England. Through the PX stores, the naval PX stores, I was able to go and have nylon stockings, chocolates, sweets, cakes, everything, towels, and it was and the people were so wonderful that there and then I made up my mind America was going to be the place for me. So after the department closed, I was put on a ship and went straight across to New York, and was met at the docks. I've got a picture here of the girl I travelled with. They put me up in a cabin with a girl of the same age as I. And the minute I got to Brooklyn, I settled down, and then the next day or 2 days later took the BMT line to New York and found myself a job, because I didn't have any money and I needed some so I could go out and enjoy myself. But things were going very well, but after about 7 or 8 months, my uncle came to the job where I was and whispered something to my boss, and the next day I was put on the Queen Mary to cross the Atlantic to come home to London, with the story from my aunt and uncle that it was too much for them to have a young girl. It was too much responsibility. But in fact, by the time I got home, which was Heir of Rosh Hashanah 1951, I realised my mother hadn't long to live. She died Heir of Yom Kippur 51, and the whole household fell into my lap. So there I was, not knowing how to cook. I had 2 older brothers, my father and my younger sister, and I had to buy Florence Greenberg's cookery book, which I memorised recipe after recipe so I could make nice food for them all. After a year of this, I was persuaded that we should all contribute money. I should go back to work and we should get a housekeeper. And this was done. So we were all looked after. Well, what happened? I joined Maccabi, kept myself occupied with all the different activities at Maccabi. And one day I had a friend who came from Ireland. Her name was Natalie Bernstein. And Natalie went to a tea dance, which we all used to do, or go dancing in the evenings at the Jewish clubs. But she went alone to this Fisher's and met two, as she termed it, Polish boys. She fancied one called Philip and said the other one was Jack, and she thought he and I would get on very well. Well, she was telling me this all the way to Shulam Rosh Hashanah. And I said, look, I don't want to meet anybody. I have already started seeing somebody from out of London, and I'm very happy. No, she wouldn't take no for an answer. So between, just after Rosh Hashanah, she made me meet Jack. And we went out in a foursome. I can remember the words exactly, but that doesn't matter. And on the second date, it was after Yom Kippur, 1954. And I think on our third date, he proposed. Oh, I said, no. This is not on, we've only just met and I'm seeing somebody else. Anyway, by 1955, we were married. April the 3rd, 55, which is now just 59 years ago. We have 3 children, Michael, Jeffrey and Debbie. And our married life has been wonderful. Jack has achieved all his ambitions. He didn't want me to work, but I did entertain all his landslide from Israel and people he survived the war with in America. They all came to stay. And life continued very nicely. We lived in Heathfield Gardens for 5 years, and after that we moved to Howcroft Avenue, where we spent 34 wonderful years. Michael's bar mitzvah was in the garden. Jeffrey, when he had his bar mitzvah, we switched to one in Israel, so all Jack's family and friends could be present. And Debbie had a class bat mitzvah because we joined Hampstead Synagogue. And all has been just wonderful. Michael went to university at Sussex, where there was implanted many Arab students. And Michael and his close friends decided if they were having to fight Arabs, he would rather do that in Israel. So off he went as he graduated with a BSc in chemistry, and he's lived in Israel ever since, which must be about 34 or 5 years ago. Jeffrey, after he finished school, went to a technical college for a while, but he said, look, why can't I go and work in Daddy's business? Which he did, and it was a great help to both of them. And Debbie became a secretary in very nice companies, and eventually Michael got married in Israel. He has 5 children, and now so far 4 grandchildren, which has made me an old bubba, grand bubba. But they're just all wonderful. Debbie got married, and we all know about Debbie, and has 3 wonderful children. She's now married to John, and he's a lovely man. And Jeffrey married Lisa, and they have 2 wonderful sons. At this time, his eldest, Nicholas, is a lawyer, and Daniel is travelling the world after finishing university. He's going to have 6 months to see the world and then decide what he's going to do. What can I say? So at this date, we have 3 married grandsons. And before I pass on, I hope to see most of my grandchildren married. So do hurry up, folks, because we don't know how much longer there is for me. But besides entertaining the people I've told you about, I did work for charity, and I formed a committee once I was introduced to the Alin Hospital for Handicapped Children in Jerusalem. I formed a committee which was a great success, and I chaired it for 24 years. I've also done Meals on Wheels in Stepney, because, you know, we all have to give back to society some of that which we have taken out. And so Meals on Wheels, where there were still quite a number of elderly Jewish people, which was very sad. They were locked up in their council flats and did appreciate the food that I brought to them. I believe it still continues today. And a member of WEETSO, member of National Association for Decorative Arts, and I try to fill my days to make them as eventful and as joyous as I can. We now live in a flat in Kidbor Avenue. There's a lovely crowd of friends that we made here. Jack has retired, and we spend our days having friends over and playing a lot of bridge. The children mostly, we go to them, not them to us, as I think I've done my stint. And we hope that Jack and I have still many years to go before we retire. And that is it. I hope you enjoy this little précis of my life. Not as eventful or as horrific as Dad is, but still it's been very nice.